This is Sweden on the 1st of June 1657, and they had been at war with first the Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and then Russia joined in a little later. But I'm not gonna talk about those wars today, because I'm talking about another kingdom that joined the war that very day. It is Denmark! No, but really. Meanwhile, the King of Sweden, Karl X Gustav, was busy with the war in Poland. Denmark had gotten support to attack Sweden from the Netherlands, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. But at this time, the Danish military was pretty weak, poorly equipped and trained. But on the other hand, their fleet was a whole nother story. But still, into war they go! When the news reached Per Brahe, the Younger, he started to put together a force of 3,700 men at Markaryd. Meanwhile, the Danish had marched into Swedish Bremen and occupied it. Now, Per was done with gathering his troops, and he marched into and attacked Scania, where he met an army of 3,000 Danish troops, and there they started the Battle of Ängelholm. The Swedes wanted to get into melee combat, but the Danish had artillery control, and after some fire exchange, which didn't really do so much, the Swedes couldn't break through the Danish and the Danish couldn't drive away the Swedish. So both sides prepared some trenches. But the Swedes were lacking supplies, so they retreated. A little later, the Danish moved for a better artillery position when they found the Swedish camp empty. Confusing. After the Battle of Ängelholm, the Swedish retreated back to the Swedish side and the Danish retreated to Helsingborg. So nothing big came out of that. But how about the Swedish king? Well, he was in the Polish city of Thorn when he got the news of the war, on the 20th of June. He packed up his army, though quite small, of 6,000 men only, but they were also the most experienced troops you could find in the area. But anyways, so on the 23rd of June, he began marching to Denmark with his army. Now, the Danish had thought that he would take the seaway and had therefore stationed most of their fleet at Bornholm there. But Karl X wasn't gonna do that. Instead, he chose to march through Swedish Pomerania to Hamburg, where he sent off an army of 1,800 men to take back Bremen, which they did, with only the fort Bremenvörde remaining in Danish hands. Now to hours of editing and realizing I have made many mistakes. Ah, that's my cue. My daily time to touch grass.
Huh?
Just don't ask any question, alright? Now, where were we? Oh yeah, so the Swedes kicked butt in Bremen and showed their superior army in action, and that the Danes just might be a little screwed. And it didn't really help that on the 10th of August, the Swedes, after just a 4-day siege, took the fort Itzehoe. Really? I'm not gonna say that. Anyways, now Sweden had basically access to all of Holstein, aka the southernmost part of Denmark, and Fredrik was like and he chose to gather his remaining forces at Fredriksodde, which was a fort that had been invested a lot by Fredrik. He even managed to retreat his troops left in Bremen. All in all, his army was around 8,700 men, while Karl X's entire army wasn't even that big. Worse was that now Frederick was playing the diplomatic game, and he was actively trying to get other countries to send a relief force to Denmark. Now, when the most important issues of the war are going on, I know, it's time for today's sponsor. Not really, but still. MEP. Now, you have probably no idea what that is or why there are 2 dots over the O, and I won't explain that today, because all you need to know is these nuts. Are you tired of how small Sweden is? You don't like IKEA is more known than the actual Sweden? Do you wish that Charles XII hadn't died in a trench in Norway and instead won the Great Northern War?
Well then you should look at a map.
We MERPs like the old times when the Swedish Empire wasn't meatballs, because it had stuff like this. Or a bit like that. Or even in something in sorts of this. And best of all, Charles XII, the one and only. Now you might think. Oh yeah. How do I become a MERP? By clicking the subscribe button. Now you're maybe saying to yourself,
You're supposed to click on that subscribe button.
my answer is,
Yes.
thank you for your time. Now back to the video. So meanwhile the Swedish army was being really cool, the Swedish Navy were supposed to take control of the sea. Spoiler alert, they hadn't. You could kinda summarize their efforts as this made the already super hard task of taking Fredrikstad almost impossible. Karl X left the army to wage another kind of battle, a diplomatic one, which he happened to be really good at. And a man called Wrangel took command of his army in his absence. Wrangel gathered his 4,000 troops to attack the almost 8,500 troops defending. How were they going to break through? In quiet, the attack begins. They had split up the army in 3 sections. 2 of the sections have a great success and only one of them has problems because of the troops carrying the explosives either die or get injured. But in the end, they break through. And this was a great Swedish victory, with only 75 dead and 195 wounded, on the Swedish side at least. On the 17th of December, the temperature drops. This would lead to one of the greatest Swedish military achievements ever. But what has happened on the second front of the war? Well, a few failed invasion attempts by both sides and the Danish occupying Jämtland. Apart from that, not a whole lot has changed. So, back to the interesting stuff. Karl X is back with the boys and is leading the army, and they have a bold plan. Because of the low temperature, the ice has frozen, and they were going to march across the belts. On the 30th of January, the Swedes set off a force of 9,000 cavalry and following them another 3,000 infantry to march across the little belt. Facing them was 5,000 Danish troops. The right flank was commanded by Wrangel and the left by the king himself. The right flank was advancing when the ice has collapsed under 2 whole squadrons of cavalry. The cold and deep water swallowed them whole. This scared the rest of Wrangel's men and slowed down the advance. Luckily, Karl X attacked the Danish flank and the Swedish won again. Only 200 of the 5,000 Danish troops escaped the island, and the rest died or got captured. The Swedes then march across multiple islands and defeat what resistance they find. Swedes make it outside Copenhagen, where they finally get word that Frederick, the King of Denmark, agrees to peace talks. Fearing that not giving the Swedes what they want would lead to an attack on Copenhagen and the following sack, which in turn might make Denmark cease to be an independent nation. That leads Frederick to agree to give up a third of Denmark's land area, including Bornholm, Halland, Blekinge and Bohuslän. From the Norwegian part of Denmark, Sweden gains Trondheim. And that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and
Bye!